Spio's conception was a birth out of necessity, like all great things in therapy are.
It's like taking my hands home with them.
Every one of my parents love it.
The really cool thing is I've seen immediate shifts in function.
But I find these easier to use than the other ones I've used.
It's comfortable.
I use it with all different populations.
I absolutely, number one, my parents love it.
And I think the kids say it all because if they're comfortable in it and they're not pulling it off, it's obviously doing something for them.
It just works.
You absolutely have to try it.
I would say you need to learn about Spio.
It began with a particular child who had a particular need, working with Nancy Hilton and his mom. And I had the luxury of coming in behind Nancy and picking up some of those children that she had been working with. So I got to watch this whole thing happen as the mother came in, and Nancy would say, how's it going and what's working, and the mom would report back, and Nancy'd say, well, let's try this. You know, we need to connect his, his rib cage with his pelvis, and I think he needs some more sensory, some compression maybe, and she could do this with her hands, but we need something that's going to move with him. Then the mom had this amazing ability to sew, and so the mom started like stitching Lycra fabrics together, and then they started saying, well, maybe we could add Velcro closure here, or maybe we could add an extra layer to give him a little more input, through the trunk space, and it just began to evolve. And the next thing you knew, they were making vests and leotards and unitards and little gloves and little arm wraps and leg wraps and whatever he needed.
It gives the children that I use it with, mostly very low tone, like the child with Down syndrome, and the children with athetosis and some ataxia, gives them consistent sensory feedback so that they can organize themselves better.
Some of the other components, pressure garments, are a little bit more static, and the kids would accommodate to the input after time, and so they would need adjustments made to it, whereas the material with the Spio is a lot more dynamic, so every time the kids move, their nervous system is resetting, and so they don't ever accommodate to the input.
I think that the vest works because it's flexible and it bends, and as the kids go one way, they sort of feel a tug, and it reminds them to use their muscles and come back up. So I think with the low tone, it's giving that input and providing them with some stability and also just awareness of where their muscles are in order to use them.
Spio looked like something that would meet the sensory needs and also the postural needs of my children, with both like neuromotor issues and also on the sensory end.
Well, because I liked the material that Spio uses to make their pressure suits, and thought that they would not be as bulky as some of the other products that I had seen out in the field.
I get a very good sensory response from the kids. It gives them a lot of organization. It gives them a great posture and movement. They seem to be able to have less falls when they're walking, especially with the real dyskinetic child.
As far as how it works for the sensory kids, I think that it just gives them that extra input to their body. The squeeze, which tends to be calming, the deep pressure is calming for them, and also gives them some awareness of where their body is in space.
It's uniform compression, I guess, and some of the other vests that they use, they're not so snug, and they tend to move around more. It doesn't give an overall compression.
I use it with kids that have neuromuscular disorders, so that they need it for a lot of trunk stability, a lot of stabilizing input. I also use it with my kids that have a lot of sensory issues, and they all love it.
My experience of working with Spio is with children with low tone, and I usually use the vest on their trunk. And I think that it gives them some proprioceptive and tactile input to the trunk, but it also makes them a little more stable.
I use the Spio vests mostly with kids with low tone who need some support for more stability through their core. And I also use them with kids with sensory processing issues, poor body awareness, proprioception, a lot of sensory seekers. I use the shirts and the pants to kind of give them some input and calm them down.
And then for some of the kids with the higher tone issues as well, they have that lower tone trunk kind of lacking piece, but then they've got all this, spasticity or whatever you want to call it that hangs out there in the extremities. So if you can help to pull their trunk together, you get some better quality movement in the extremities.
The most recent diagnoses that I've used it for is Angelman syndrome. I've also have a few ethetoid children that I use it on, as well as hypotonia.
I use SPIO suits with children who actually have low tone, or children who have normal to low tone but have a lot of sensory processing issues.
With my low-tone children, I find that they have better trunk control and move better. With the children on the spectrum, they've found that their behavior is better. Sometimes they have better speech.
I've had kids that will put it on and they're up on their toes all the time, have a lot of sensory issues. Kids that fall under the autism umbrella or PDD, and as soon as they put it on, they'll start talking. They're a lot more organized, come together. I mean, really significant differences right away.
The really cool thing is I've seen immediate shifts in function when I put it on from the assessment kit. Put it on, I try it, and they're like whoop, sitting up independently, and they realize it. The child realizes it and wants to do it more and more.
I have kids that I put it on one time like for sizing, and then we take it off and they're crying and screaming and reaching for it because they want it back. They want to put it on. They know right away that they want it.
I've seen sensory kids instantly sort of calm down when it's on, and where they're seeking movement and all over the place, I've seen them put it on. Getting it on sometimes is traumatic for the sensory kids, but once it's on, they really adjust to it and tend to settle down.
Once they have it on and they see what it does and how it organizes them, especially the children with sensory processing dysfunction, these children takes them maybe a little bit longer to get adjusted to them, but once they have it on, they realize that it gives them the input they need, so they respond quite well to it.
Because I have kids that wear those all the time, 24/7, and you're battling them to get it off to laundry it, so we buy them a couple so they can wear one until you're ready to laundry that one, take it off and put the other one on.
A great deal of excitement and pride because their child is sitting up by themselves. If not for the first time, for a functional amount of time.
I explain it to parents like a supportive undershirt, because some of the other types of terms seem that the parents get a little bit nervous, but when I explain it kind of like a supportive undershirt that they can wear under their clothes, and the fact that the parents don't have to see their child looking different with everything on the outside, it is something that they can use underneath, kind of like, and you can make it fun for the kids.
I just sort of explain the philosophy to parents and ask them to try it and see what happens. And often when I put it on, they'll see a change in their child and then they're sold on it. So I think that parents are looking for ways to help their kids, and even though it sounds different and it looks different, once they try it and they see changes, they tend to be positive about it and they buy into the idea and see that it works.
Most of the parents that I've worked with, they want to know where they can get it because they see that it benefits the child and they want to buy it themselves.
And the other reason why I like it very well is that it's easy for the parents to put on. And you don't get anything used that isn't easy to put on.
Absolutely, number one, my parents love it, and it's easy for them to put on the child, and its compliancy is over the top.
One parent told me that it was easier for her to carry her child when she had her SPIO on, so to me that was it was like a bell going off that, wow, she's supported more with this on and she's using her muscles to hold herself up while her mom carries her.
I've talked with other therapists and they're just like, oh, well, what kind of compliance do you have from families to use it? And I mean, I've not experienced any problems with that, because as soon as they put it on and they see the difference, it's not a problem. And it's not overwhelming to use, because it's really easy to use with the Velcro and everything. And once the kids put it on, they love it.
My personal bias is that I fell in love with them when they were no longer custom, but off the shelf, because I work with all levels, socioeconomic status, and so acquiring them can be difficult for some families, and now it's not a barrier any longer.
I've seen many insurances pay for it. Most will pay at least most of the cost, and then there'll be a deductible. Medical coupon tends to pay for them in full. And then I've had parents pay out of pocket for them if need be.
I think it's very affordable. So far, I haven't had no trouble with getting coverage from the insurances. Again, it does take a little bit of effort on the therapist's part of writing letters, but so far I've had no trouble getting them covered.
One of the children on the spectrum, the first day they put it on him, he spoke more than he had ever done so before, and a few days later they sent him home with it on, and his home therapist and parents were so thrilled. Again, they wanted to buy it immediately.
I put the child in the suit. They wore it for maybe 2 weeks, and then they began walking independently. And the very first goal the parent wants the child to meet is to walk, to be able to walk, and this child did that.
He doesn't have a diagnosis, but if you take the diagnosis of cerebral palsy as sensory motor dysfunction, he would fall in that category. Pretty severely involved, and when we put the shirt, long sleeve shirt, and the long pants on him, he has a little wooden chair like the old school desk type of chairs. We sat him on it and he just sat there for a minute or 2 minutes. Mom brought a pinwheel over and he started reaching out for the pinwheel, and Mom just about started crying.
I tried it with a boy who was 10 years old with mild athetoid CP, and I tried him in the SPIO vest, and if he was here he would tell you that he thought that he stood taller and that he walked a little bit with tighter muscles, as he said. But I actually have that same boy now in SPIO pants, and I had his one-to-one run down to find me to show me how fast he's now moving on the stairs, and he asked me to buy him a pair of SPIOs.
There was a 2-year-old that had been receiving speech since he was 5 months old. Speech therapists have been working with him twice a week. I started seeing him about 4 months ago. We ordered him the pressure garment, and he had no words. And when we put the pressure garment on, he started talking. I mean, it was immediate. And when he doesn't wear the pressure garment, he doesn't talk. He's a real big toe walker also, and he just really doesn't have any idea where he is in space, and that deep pressure helps him come together, get really organized and focused. Without the pressure garment on, he's running all over the place. When that's on, he slows down, comes together, and then he starts talking.
If you work with children with neuromotor problems, children with low muscle tone, children with sensory processing dysfunction, you have to give it a try, because it's one of the adjuncts that I talk about in the courses that I teach, that I think works effectively as an adjunct to our therapy.
I would say to absolutely go online, check it out, read the testimonials, and I would say that it's gonna not only make the child's life happier, but also maybe your life as a parent a little bit easier, because your child's more comfortable, and that's less stressful for both you and your family.
You just have to try it. Trial and error. I can't imagine it's good for everyone. It's what nothing is good for everyone, but trial and error, try it.
Then as I tried it and got used to it and understood the way that the fabric moves with the kids, I became sold on SPIO, and so I think it's worth exploring for any therapist. It's changed a lot of the kids that I work with.
They have to try it, absolutely. No doubt about it.